The first time I stumbled upon the abandoned theater in Philadelphia, it was a pleasant autumn afternoon. The faded grandeur of the building stood solemnly against the backdrop of a clear sky, its facade an eloquent testament to an era long past. Once a majestic establishment, the theater now languished in neglect, whispering tales of glory days to those who cared to listen. For me, it was love at first sight. The peeling paint, the cracked windows, and the musty scent of forgotten dreams drew me in, promising stories that echoed in the quiet corridors of my mind. The entrance was barred to the casual observer, but a side door yielded with minimal persuasion. Inside, the dust-laden air tasted of time, and the silence enveloped me like a shroud. Sunbeams filtered through broken windows, painting patterns of shadow and light across the rows of empty seats. My footsteps echoed softly in the auditorium as I marveled at the ornate yet decaying architecture. Despite its neglect, the theater held an undeniable charm, calling out to me with an inexplicable allure. For weeks I returned, finding solace in its solitude. My daytime visits were peaceful, allowing me to explore undisturbed, savoring the theater's rich tapestry of history and the quiet comfort it offered. I imagined the performances that once graced its stage, the laughter and applause that filled the air, and the stories it had once brought to life. It became my sanctuary, a secret retreat from the bustling world outside. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson, I lingered longer than usual. The theater took on a different character as shadows deepened, its atmosphere growing thick with a presence I couldn't quite define. The air was colder, and a shiver ran through me, but I dismissed it as the natural chill of evening settling in. As I sat in the audience, lost in thought, a sound disturbed the stillness, a soft rustling, like fabric brushing against skin. Straining to see through the gloom, I caught sight of movement near the stage. My heart skipped a beat, the rational part of my mind insisting it was merely a trick of the light, or perhaps an animal seeking shelter. Yet, curiosity pushed me forward, my steps cautious as I approached the stage. And there it was, a figure, draped in shadow, standing silently as if awaiting applause. My breath caught in my throat, fear pricking at the edges of my mind. The figure seemed to shimmer, its form shifting like smoke in the dim light. I blinked, and it was gone, leaving me alone in the silent theater. My heart pounded in my chest, but the encounter left me with an unsettling curiosity rather than terror. The next day, I returned, unable to shake the experience from my mind. The theater was unchanged, its dusty seats and peeling walls steadfast in their neglect. Yet I felt a presence, a watchful gaze following my every move. It was as if the theater itself had come alive, the air thrumming with a silent energy that had not been there before. I was drawn to the stage again, a compulsion I could not resist. This time, there was no figure, only the empty stage staring back at me. But as I stood there, a faint whisper reached my ears, like a voice carried on the wind, too soft to comprehend, but unmistakably present. I stood frozen, the whisper threading through my mind, filling me with an inexplicable sorrow. It was a lament, a song of mourning for something lost, yet not forgotten. Days turned into weeks, and my visits became a ritual. The theater was no longer just a place of refuge, but a living entity with which I shared a profound connection. I learned to embrace the whispers, the shadows, and the solitude they offered, each visit leaving me with a deeper sense of understanding that defied explanation. One evening, as winter's chill set in, the atmosphere shifted again, a tension threading through the air, as if the theater was holding its breath. The stage beckoned, and I found myself standing before it, anticipation curling in my chest. The whispers grew louder, coalescing into a chorus that resonated deep within me. I closed my eyes, and the world fell away, leaving me adrift in a sea of sound and sorrow. When I opened my eyes, the theater had transformed. The shadows danced with life, figures materializing from the darkness, their forms ethereal yet solid. They moved with a grace that belied their ghostly appearance, their expressions etched with emotion too profound for words. It was a performance unlike any other, a ballet of melancholy and beauty that left me breathless. I watched, entranced, as they told a story of loss and longing, of a heartbroken soul unable to find peace. They drew me into their world, their tale unfolding with an elegance that defied description. The theater was alive with their presence, each movement a testament to the power of sorrow and the resilience of the human spirit. And as their story reached its crescendo, I felt a shift within myself, a recognition of the pain and beauty intertwined in the fabric of existence. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the figures dissolved into the shadows, leaving the theater silent once more. But the air was different, charged with a vibrant energy that resonated through the empty seats and faded walls. It lingered long after I had left, a testament to the power of the theater and the stories it held within its bones. The realization came slowly, creeping into my consciousness like the first light of dawn. The theater was more than just a building. It was a vessel, a conduit for the emotions and experiences of those who had passed through its door. It thrived on the sorrow and joy it had witnessed, weaving them into stories that played out on its stage. I became obsessed, my visits more frequent, as I delved deeper into the theater's secrets. Each encounter left me with a deeper understanding of the delicate balance between light and dark, of the beauty that lay within the shadows. The theater had chosen me, entrusted me with its stories, and I was determined to uncover all that it had to offer. And so, I returned again and again, each visit revealing new layers of the theater's mystery. The whispers became words, the shadows took on familiar forms, and the performances grew more vivid, each one a tapestry of emotion that left me breathless. The theater was alive, its soul intertwined with mine, and I was powerless to resist its call. As winter gave way to spring, the theater's grip on me tightened. I could feel its influence in every aspect of my life, its presence a constant companion that lingered at the edges of my consciousness. It was as if the theater had become a part of me, its stories interwoven with my own. Then, one night, as the world outside lay shrouded in darkness, the theater revealed its final secret. I stood on the stage, the air thick with anticipation, the whispers a cacophony of sound that filled my mind. The shadows surged forward, coalescing into a figure that stood before me, its eyes dark and unyielding. It spoke, its voice a melody of sorrow and hope that resonated deep within my soul. It told of a time when the theater was alive with laughter and joy, of a tragedy that had torn it apart, leaving only memories and echoes in its wake. It spoke of a love lost and a heart broken, a tale as old as time, yet uniquely its own. As the figure spoke, the story unfolded around us, the shadows dancing with a life of their own. The theater was alive with their energy, each movement a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of emotion. I watched, entranced, as the figure's tale reached its climax, a crescendo of sound and light that left me breathless. And then, as the last note faded into silence, the figure dissolved into the shadows, leaving me alone on the stage. The theater was silent, the air still and heavy with the weight of its stories. But I felt a lightness within me, a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. The theater had shared its soul with me, its stories a part of my own. It had shown me the beauty in sorrow, the light in the dark, and the power of love to transcend time and space. And as I stood there, the whispers a soft murmur in the background, I knew that I was forever changed. The theater had become a part of me, its stories interwoven with my own. It had opened my eyes to the beauty of the unseen, the power of emotion, and the resilience of the human spirit. And though the world outside continued to turn, I knew that I would always carry a piece of the theater within me, its stories a light in the darkness of my soul. Uncle Sal's Pizza was a fixture of my childhood, a small, unassuming pizzeria nestled within the labyrinthine corridors of an old strip mall. Its neon sign flickered in the evenings, casting a warm, pinkish hue over the cracked pavement and faded storefronts. The mall itself was a relic from the 1980s, a time capsule of pastel colors and outdated fonts that whispered tales of a more vibrant past. I remember spending countless afternoons there with my parents, savoring the aroma of freshly baked dough and melted cheese, basking in the camaraderie of shared meals and laughter. Life has a way of drifting you away from such simple pleasures. I moved away for college and then for a job, the strip mall and Uncle Sal's fading into the recesses of my memory. It wasn't until I returned to my hometown, weary from the relentless pace of city life, that the familiar glow of Uncle Sal's sign caught my eye once more. The strip mall, still standing defiantly against the passage of time, seemed to beckon me with a magnetic pull. The inside of the pizzeria was much as I remembered. The same checkerboard floor, the same worn vinyl booths, even the same arcade machine humming quietly in the corner. The owner, Salvatore, still manned the counter with his familiar gruff charm, though his hair was now more salt than pepper, and his hands bore the marks of age. I ordered a slice and sat near the window, watching the world outside slip from day to night. As the shadows lengthened, the mall took on an eerie stillness, a quiet that felt like the intake of a breath held just a second too long. The pizza was just as I recalled, chewy crust, tangy sauce, cheese that stretched in long strands, a taste of nostalgia, comforting in its unchanging simplicity. It was during one of these quiet evenings that I first noticed something odd, a flicker at the edge of my vision, a movement just beyond the reach of understanding. I looked up, certain I'd seen a figure pass by the glass-fronted entrance, but the mall's corridor was deserted. I shrugged it off, attributing it to shadows cast by the flickering neon and the tiredness that seemed to cling to me like a second skin. But the unease lingered, growing with each visit. It was subtle at first, a whisper at the back of my mind that grew louder with each slice of pizza consumed under the watchful gaze of Uncle Sal. It wasn't just the flickers of movement that unsettled me. It was the sounds, soft, almost imperceptible echoes of laughter, the distant clink of a plate, the faint strains of music that never quite resolved into a coherent melody. I tried to rationalize it, to convince myself that it was simply the creaks and groans of an old building settling into the night. But logic and reason seemed to slip away each time I returned to Uncle Sal's. replaced by a growing sense of being watched, of being not quite alone. The strip mall itself seemed to change under the cloak of darkness. The corridors, once familiar and welcoming, now felt like the interior of a labyrinth. The shadows deepening into something almost tangible. I found myself hurrying through them, heart pounding in my chest, eyes darting from one darkened corner to the next. Determined to shake off the unease, I began to visit Uncle Sal's earlier in the day, when the sun's rays could still penetrate the dusty skylights and chase away the creeping shadows. The mall was quieter then, the footfalls of the few remaining patrons echoing in the empty halls. But even in daylight, the sense of something lurking just beyond sight persisted. One afternoon, as I sat in my usual booth, I noticed a photograph hanging on the wall that I had never paid much attention to before. It was a black and white image of the strip mall in its heyday, bustling with people. There was Uncle Sal standing proudly in front of his pizzeria, his features youthful and full of life. A pang of nostalgia twisted in my chest at the sight. As I stared at the photo, a feeling of mâle vu washed over me. A memory, long buried, surfaced with startling clarity. I remembered being a child, sitting at this very booth, mesmerized by the same photograph. But there was something different, something that seemed to elude my grasp. I leaned closer, squinting at the faces captured in time. There, among the crowd, was a figure that stood out, a young girl with a braid trailing down her back. Her face was turned towards the camera, her expression one of pure, unadulterated joy. I had seen her before, or rather, I had felt her presence in those fleeting moments of unease. She was the specter that haunted the corridors, the echo of laughter that resonated in the silence. The realization sent a shiver down my spine, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place with an unsettling click. Determined to uncover the truth, I approached Uncle Sal, hoping for some insight into the photograph and its spectral subject. Sal was hesitant at first, his eyes clouded with something akin to sorrow. But after a moment he sighed, the weight of untold stories etched into the lines of his face. He told me of a time when the mall was vibrant, filled with families and laughter. The girl in the photograph was his niece, Maria, a bright, vivacious child whose laughter could light up the gloomiest of days. Maria had disappeared one summer, the details shrouded in mystery and heartbreak. 9. Pahina takes me by apple pick and tears a piece off the top of my head. Some said she had run away, while others whispered of darker possibilities. Sal never believed she had left voluntarily. The mall had been her home, the pizzeria her sanctuary. Her disappearance had cast a shadow over the place, a shadow that seemed to linger despite the passage of time. The story haunted me, the echoes of the past entwining with the present in a tapestry of melancholy and unanswered questions. I found myself returning to the mall, to Uncle Sal's, driven by a compulsion I couldn't quite explain. I hoped, perhaps foolishly, for a glimpse of the girl, for some sign that her spirit might find peace. Each visit, the echoes grew louder. The laughter, once a whisper, became a chorus, filling the pizzeria with a ghostly vibrancy. I could feel her presence, a comforting yet unearthly warmth. It was as if Maria was reaching out, her spirit entwined with the very essence of the pizzeria. One particular evening, as I sat alone in the booth, the air around me seemed to thicken, the temperature dropping ever so slightly. The neon sign outside flickered erratically, casting strange patterns across the floor. I closed my eyes, allowing the echoes to wash over me. The laughter seemed to surround me, a tangible presence that brushed against my consciousness. When I opened my eyes, the booth across from me was occupied. Maria sat there, her form insubstantial yet unmistakable, Her eyes, wide and filled with an innocence lost to time, met mine. She smiled, a bittersweet, fleeting expression that held 1,000 unspoken words. The world around us seemed to hold its breath, the moment stretching into eternity. I felt an overwhelming urge to speak, to bridge the gap between the living and the lost. But no words came. My voice caught in my throat, stifled by the weight of the spectral encounter. Maria's image began to fade, her form dissolving into the air like mist, yet her essence lingered, a whisper of warmth that settled into the depths of my soul. I sat there long after she had vanished, the echoes of her laughter still resonating in the pizzeria's silent embrace. The following day, I returned to Uncle Sal's, the familiar sounds and smells welcoming me like an old friend. The tension that had plagued me for weeks seemed to dissipate, replaced by a sense of calm acceptance. Maria's presence, though fleeting, had brought a hint of closure to the mystery of her disappearance. Sal noticed the change in me, his eyes questioning, but kind. I shared with him my experience, the vision of Maria's spirit, her silent plea for connection. He listened, his expression softening with a mix of sadness and gratitude. "Maybe she's finally found some peace," he said, his voice tinged with a hopeful melancholy. "Maybe we all have." I continued to visit Uncle Sal's, the pizzeria now a place of solace rather than unease. The echoes remained, a reminder of the past's persistence, but they no longer filled me with dread. Instead, they were like the fragments of a beloved melody, comforting in their familiarity. The strip mall, too, seemed to settle into its own rhythm, the shadows less oppressive, the corridors less labyrinthine. Though the building still creaked and groaned with age, there was a sense of harmony, a balance restored. Yet, even as I found peace in the echoes, a part of me remained vigilant, attuned to the mall's subtle shifts. The fear had transformed, no longer a sharp pang of dread, but a lingering awareness of the boundaries between worlds, of the stories trapped between time and memory. On quiet nights, when the neon sign of Uncle Sal's glowed softly against the darkness, I often wondered about the other stories that lay hidden within the mall's walls. How many other spirits lingered, their voices lost to the cacophony of history? I knew I would never have all the answers, but perhaps that was the nature of such places, a blend of reality and illusion, of the seen and the unseen. In the end, it was enough to know that Maria's laughter, once an echo of sorrow, had become a note of hope woven into the fabric of Uncle Sal's pizza. As long as the sign flickered and the dough was kneaded, her spirit would endure, a guardian of memories and a beacon for those who sought the comfort of the past. And so, with each visit to Uncle Sal's, I found myself enveloped in a gentle nostalgia. Not haunted, but held, part of a larger story that spanned beyond the confines of time. A story that would linger, like the aftertaste of a cherished meal, long after the last slice was gone. My first impression of Japan was one of enchantment. The sprawling cityscapes of Tokyo seemed to pulse with energy, a testament to the country's blend of futurism and tradition. My exchange program had placed me in a quaint town on the outskirts, far removed from the bustling city life. The Nishimura family, my hosts, welcomed me with open arms. Their home was a traditional Japanese house, nestled amidst a serene landscape of cherry blossoms and distant, mist-cloaked mountains. It was picturesque, like stepping into a pastoral painting. The Nishimuras were kind and gracious. Mr. Nishimura, a reserved man with wise eyes, spent his days tending to the small tea garden behind the house, while Mrs. Nishimura, ever the doting hostess, ensured my every need was met. Their daughter, Aiko, was a lively spirit, her laughter filling the ancient hallways with warmth. I felt a part of their family almost immediately. My days were routine, but fulfilling. I attended the local high school with Aiko, where I struggled through kanji and delighted in cultural exchanges. Each evening, we gathered around the low dining table for meals that were both a culinary delight and a lesson in Japanese etiquette. Life was tranquil, and I found myself adapting to this new rhythm with surprising ease. It was during one of my late-night studies that the first disturbance occurred. The house was quiet, illuminated only by the soft glow of my desk lamp. I was immersed in my textbooks when a low creaking sound reached my ears. It was rhythmic, like the slow swing of an old rocking chair. I paused, listening intently, but the sound ceased as abruptly as it had started. Shrugging it off as the natural settling of an old house, I returned to my studies. The next few nights, however, the creaking persisted. Each time, it would begin around midnight and last for several minutes. It was peculiar, yet not unsettling enough to disturb my sleep. I mentioned it to Eiko one morning over breakfast, expecting her to dismiss it as easily as I had. Instead, her expression tightened, a fleeting shadow passing over her normally cheerful demeanor. "It's probably just the wind," she offered. Though her tone was unconvincing, I didn't press further, sensing an unspoken discomfort in her reluctance to discuss it. Over the following weeks, the disturbances grew more frequent and varied. Doors would creak open, their hinges groaning in protest, only to be found firmly shut moments later. Lights flickered with an eerie predictability, as if unseen hands toyed with the switches. I began to feel watched, a prickling sensation that raised the fine hairs on my neck. Yet, each time I turned to catch a glimpse, I was met with only empty rooms and shadowy corners. One evening, as I prepared for bed, I noticed something peculiar. A faint, almost imperceptible scent wafting through the air. It was floral, yet not any fragrance I could identify. Sweet, but disquieting. It seemed to linger in the hallway outside my room. I resolved to ask Mrs. Nishimura about it in the morning. When I did, her reaction was unexpected. Her hands, busy with preparing breakfast, paused. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought, her eyes distant. "It's probably the garden," she said finally, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a hint of unease. "The winds carry the scent indoors sometimes." Though her explanation seemed plausible, it did little to quell the burgeoning sense of unease growing within me. The disturbances, once easy to dismiss, now felt like a puzzle demanding to be solved. One night, the suspense reached a crescendo. I awoke in the early hours, compelled by a sound more distinct than before, a whisper. Soft voice, melodic yet unintelligible, echoing through the walls. Heart pounding, I slipped out of bed and into the hallway. The house was steeped in stillness, the moon casting a silver light through paper-thin shoji screens. The voice drew me forward, down the hallway towards a section of the house I rarely visited. It led to a small room I hadn't been in before, one that Aiko had once mentioned was used for storage. The door was ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning me to enter. I hesitated, knowing instinctively that whatever lay beyond was the source of my unease. But curiosity spurred me onward. I pushed the door open, the tatami mat creaking softly underfoot as I stepped inside. Oh, the room was sparse, save for an old rocking chair nestled in the corner and an altar adorned with photographs and incense sticks. The air was thick, heavy with the same floral scent that had puzzled me before. As I approached the altar, the whispering ceased. I found myself staring at a photograph of a young girl, her eyes bright and enigmatic, a smile that seemed both joyous and solemn. She bore a striking resemblance to Eiko. Beneath her image was a name I couldn't read, but the date was clear. She had passed many years ago. A chill ran through me, and I understood. This was Eiko's sister, one whose existence had never been mentioned. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. The disturbances, the whispers, the scent. It was all connected to this girl, to her spirit, perhaps trapped in a cycle of longing or unrest. I backed away slowly, my mind reeling with questions. I left the room, closing the door quietly, the rocking chair beginning its slow, rhythmic creak once more. The next morning I confronted Eiko, my voice low and urgent. Her eyes widened, and she led me outside to the garden, where we could speak without walls listening in. She confirmed my suspicions, her voice tinged with sorrow. Her sister Hana had been lively, full of dreams larger than the confines of their small town. A tragic accident had taken her away too soon, leaving a void that the family still felt acutely. She never left, Eiko admitted, her eyes downcast. Her spirit is here. We hear her sometimes, feel her presence. It's like she's trying to tell us something, but we don't know what. My parents, they don't speak of her much, but they honor her memory. I guess we all hoped she'd find peace. My heart ached for the family, for Eiko, and most of all for Hana, trapped between worlds. I suggested performing a ritual, something to help Hana move on. Eiko agreed, her relief palpable at the prospect of finally addressing the unspoken haunting. That evening, with the Nishimuras gathered, we lit incense and candles around the small altar. I spoke, softly at first, then with growing confidence, addressing Hana's spirit. I expressed our wish for her to find peace, for her laughter to echo in happy memories rather than hollow hallways. As the incense smoke curled upward, the air seemed to still, a hushed silence enveloping us. I felt a shift, subtle yet profound, as if the house itself exhaled a long-held breath. The floral scent blossomed once more, sweet and lingering, and I felt a gentle breeze caress my cheek. In the days that followed, the disturbances ceased. The house felt lighter, the atmosphere serene. Eiko and her parents seemed at peace, their smiles genuine and unburdened. The memory of Hana lingered, but it was a gentle presence, not the restless energy it had been before. As my time in Japan drew to a close, I reflected on the experience, a mixture of sadness and gratitude filling my heart. I had come seeking cultural exchange and found something far deeper, a connection to the unseen, the understanding that love transcends even the boundaries of life and death. On my final night, I stood in the garden, gazing at the stars. The air was cool, the scent of cherry blossoms mingling with the night breeze. I whispered a silent goodbye to Hana, hoping she had found her way to wherever her spirit longed to go. When I turned to head back inside, I thought I heard a soft, melodic whisper on the wind. It was fleeting, gone almost before I could register it, but I smiled nonetheless. Perhaps it was just the wind, or perhaps it was a farewell, a final echo of a spirit at peace. The clock on the wall ticked with a steady rhythm, matching the soft whisper of pencils against paper. Sunlight streamed in through the large windows of the elementary school classroom, casting a warm glow over the rows of small desks. The room was a typical one, with colorful posters adorning the walls. each promising the joys of learning, and a large alphabet banner stretching across the top of the blackboard. Mrs. Ellis, a gentle woman with a penchant for floral dresses and comforting smiles, stood at the front. Her voice was calm, soothing, as she explained the assignment to her attentive audience of third graders. "This month's project is about someone special in your life," she said, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she scanned the room. "It could be a family member, a friend, or anyone who has made a difference to you. You'll write a report about them and share it with the class." The students nodded, some already scribbling ideas on their notepads, while others chewed thoughtfully on their pencils. Among them sat Tommy Hargrove, a quiet boy with sandy hair and big, thoughtful eyes. He was known for his curiosity and the way he often seemed lost in his own world. Tommy's head was bent low over his paper, and his pencil moved with purpose. He always took assignments seriously, and today was no different. As the week progressed, the classroom hummed with energy as students worked on their reports. They whispered excitedly about siblings, grandparents, and even pets that they would be writing about. Mrs. Ellis continued to guide them, offering encouragement and helping those who were stuck on their thoughts. The day for presentations arrived, bright and clear, with a chill of autumn in the air. Mrs. Ellis, standing at her usual spot, clapped her hands softly to bring the room to order. "Let's begin with our presentations," she announced. "Who would like to go first?" Hands shot up around the room, and one by one students shared touching stories about their chosen subjects. Laughter and applause echoed with each presentation, filling the room with an infectious cheeriness. Finally, it was Tommy's turn. He walked to the front of the class, clutching his paper with a quiet determination. Mrs. Ellis gave him an encouraging nod, her eyes softening with the knowledge of how shy Tommy could be. "My report is about my friend," Tommy began, his voice a little tremulous at first. His classmates listened, attentive as always. "Her name is Gwen. She's special because she helps me see things nobody else can." There was a murmur of interest from the students, and some exchanged curious glances. Mrs. Ellis tilted her head slightly, intrigued. "Go on, Tommy," she said gently. Tommy took a deep breath, and as he continued, his voice grew stronger, more confident. "Gwen is different from other friends because she lives in the house that used to be next to ours. It's not there anymore, but she still visits me. She tells me stories about what happened before." The class was silent now, a hush settling as Tommy's words painted a picture that was both vivid and mysterious. "Gwen says she used to play in the garden where there are just weeds now. She remembers the swings and the flowers, but then, one day, there was a big storm, and everything changed." Mrs. Ellis listened intently, her expression shifting from curiosity to something deeper. She recognized the imaginative nature of children, yet there was something about Tommy's earnest delivery that was unsettling. "After the storm," Tommy continued, "Gwen stayed behind. She said she wanted to make sure the gardens would grow again. She tells me secrets about the trees and the birds, and she knows things that happened a long time ago, things nobody else remembers." A chill crept into the room, barely noticeable but present, like a shadow passing over the sun. The students sat, rapt, as Tommy's tale unfolded. "Gwen tells me about people who used to live there too. She says they still walk around sometimes, and she watches over them." The narrative had taken a strange turn, and Mrs. Ellis was unsure of how to react. She glanced at the class, noting the mix of fascination and unease on their faces. "Tommy," she said carefully, "you have a very vivid imagination, but this friend of yours, Gwen, does she really live there?" Tommy nodded, his eyes unwavering. "Yes, Mrs. Ellis. Gwen is very real. She leaves me messages sometimes, Like when there'll be a storm or if someone new is going to move into the neighborhood? She says she can't come to school because she belongs to the garden. A nervous giggle escaped from one of the students, but it was quickly silenced by a stern glance from Mrs. Ellis. "Thank you for sharing, Tommy," she said, her voice warm but edged with an uncertainty she couldn't quite place. That was a very interesting report. Tommy returned to his seat, and the presentations continued. Yet the room felt different now, as though some invisible presence lingered in the air. After class, Mrs. Ellis pondered Tommy's story, a seed of concern taking root in her mind. Was this merely a child's fancy, or something else entirely? Days passed, and the routine of school life carried on. Autumn leaves danced outside the windows, painting the world in hues of gold and brown. But Mrs. Ellis couldn't shake the story of Gwen from her thoughts. It clung to her mind, whispering possibilities that she tried to dismiss. One afternoon, after the final bell had rung and the students had filtered out, Mrs. Ellis found herself walking toward the area where Tommy lived. It was a lovely neighborhood, lined with trees and small, well-kept houses. As she approached the plot where Tommy's house stood, she noticed the empty lot next door, overgrown with weeds and wildflowers. Curiosity piqued. She decided to take a closer look, her footsteps crunching on the gravel path that bordered the plot. The remnants of a stone foundation were visible through the tall grass, hinting at what once had been. Mrs. Ellis imagined a garden filled with the laughter of children, swings swaying in the breeze, but now it was silent, the air thick with a quiet stillness that made her shiver despite the warmth of the day. As she turned to leave, something caught her eye. A small, colorful object nestled among the weeds. She bent down to pick it up, discovering it was a weathered children's toy, a little figure dressed in a faded red dress. It seemed oddly out of place, yet somehow fitting within the narrative Tommy had woven. She carried the toy back to her car, her thoughts a tumult of questions. Was it merely a coincidence? Or was there more to Tommy's story than she had assumed? The line between reality and imagination blurred unsettlingly, leaving her with a sense of something profound, something watchful. That night, Mrs. Ellis dreamed of the garden. It was alive with color and sound, vibrant under a sky of brilliant blue. Children played among the flowers, their laughter echoing in the air. And there, standing among them, was a girl with golden hair and a smile that seemed to hold secrets. She waved at Mrs. Ellis, beckoning her to join them. When she awoke, the dream lingered like a half-remembered song. She rose, feeling compelled to learn more about the neighborhood's history, the house, and the storm Tommy had mentioned. Her search led her to the town's archives, where old newspapers and records lay in dusty files. As she combed through the documents, a story began to emerge. Decades ago, a storm had indeed swept through the area, leaving destruction in its wake. One house in particular had been severely damaged and eventually torn down. The family who lived there moved away, but not before the neighborhood had been marked by tragedy. A child had gone missing, her name lost in the mists of time, but her presence evidently felt by those who had remained. Mrs. Ellis couldn't dispel the feeling that this past held a connection to Tommy's Gwen. It was a tenuous link, but one that resonated with the eerie familiarity of her dream. She drove home that evening with a sense of the uncanny, the lines of reality and memory weaving together in a dance she couldn't quite grasp. In class, Tommy's demeanor hadn't changed. He remained the same quiet, observant child, participating as he always had. Yet, Mrs. Ellis noticed him more keenly now, watching the way his gaze seemed to drift, as if he were listening to voices just beyond the edge of hearing. As autumn deepened, The winds began to carry a chill, rustling through the trees with a sound like distant whispers. The children in the class grew restless, their energy a reflection of the shifting seasons. But Tommy, he seemed more at peace than ever, a calmness enveloping him like a second skin. One day, Mrs. Ellis decided to speak to Tommy's parents, curious to know if they were aware of his stories about Gwen. She found them welcoming and kind, their home a reflection of warmth and comfort. As she politely inquired about Tommy's imaginary friend, she was surprised to find them unfazed. "Oh, yes," his mother said with a soft chuckle. "Tommy's always had a vivid imagination. He's very creative and spends a lot of time in the garden. We think it's wonderful that he finds inspiration there." His father nodded in agreement. "He talks about this friend often. We just thought it was part of being a child, you know. Kids see the world differently, with the kind of magic we often lose as adults." Mrs. Ellis couldn't help but smile at their perspective, though the mystery of Gwen still tugged at her thoughts. As she left, she paused to glance at the garden, now a swirl of autumn colors. She understood on some level that Tommy's connection to this invisible friend was more than mere fantasy. It was a testament to the power of memory, imagination, and the echoes of the past that linger in unexpected ways. Back at school, life continued its gentle rhythm. The clock ticked on, marking the passage of time with its steady cadence. But for Mrs. Ellis, the world felt subtly altered, as if she too had glimpsed something beyond the ordinary, a fleeting shadow in the corner of her eye, a whisper carried on the wind. And Tommy, he remained unchanged, his stories of Gwen a part of him as intrinsic as the air he breathed. The other children accepted it as one of those unexplainable things that simply was, their curiosity satisfied by the magic of childhood. As the leaves turned and fell, Mrs. Ellis found herself often looking out the windows of the classroom, her gaze drawn to the patch of land where the house once stood. She imagined the garden as it might have been, alive with laughter and life, and she wondered about the stories it still held, waiting to be told. Waiting to be told. In the quiet moments, when the classroom was empty and the world seemed hushed, she thought she could almost hear the echoes of a child's voice, weaving between the shadows of memory and dream. It was a story unfinished, a presence unseen, yet undeniably felt, a lingering wonder, a whisper of the uncanny that would stay with her long after the seasons had turned.
Growing up, Nana's garden was my sanctuary, a veritable oasis tucked away behind her quaint little cottage on the outskirts of town. It was a world of its own, separated from the rush and tumble of life. The garden sprawled in all directions, a tapestry of vibrant flowers and creeping vines, interspersed with ancient oaks and a delicate stone path that wound its way to the pond at the heart of it all. The air always seemed a bit crisper here, the colors a touch more vivid, perhaps because everything was imbued with the love and care Nana devoted to every living thing within those confines. I spent countless hours in that garden, losing myself in the symphony of chirping crickets and rustling leaves. It was where I first learned to appreciate the simple beauty of nature, guided by Nana's gentle hand. She taught me to recognize the songs of different birds, the names of exotic plants, and the delicate balance of life and decay that sustained the garden's lush ecosystem. Her pond, however, was the crown jewel. It glittered under the sun, a mirror to the heavens, surrounded by lilies and reeds swaying softly in the breeze. Life was calm, predictable, much like the gentle ripples that played across the pond's surface. Nana often said that the garden was magical, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. I dismissed her words as whimsical fancy, the kind of stories grandmothers tell to enchant their grandchildren. Until one day, when everything changed. It started as any other summer afternoon. I was visiting Nana for the weekend, eager to escape the noise of the city. I took my usual walk around the garden, savoring the scent of blooming jasmine and the soft touch of grass beneath my feet. As I approached the pond, something unusual caught my attention. A frog, larger than any I had ever seen, perched on a flat stone near the water's edge. Its skin was a deep, mesmerizing shade of emerald, glistening in the sunlight. I paused, intrigued by this unexpected visitor. Frogs were common enough around the pond, but this one was different. There was an intelligence in its eyes, a knowing look that seemed almost unnatural. As I watched, it turned its gaze directly toward me, and to my utter astonishment, spoke. "Welcome back," it croaked in a voice that was both raspy and melodic. "It's been a while since you visited." I stood frozen, my mind scrambling to make sense of the situation. Talking animals belonged in fairy tales, not in my Nana's garden. Yet, here was a frog engaging me in conversation. I blinked, half expecting it to be a trick of the light or a figment of my imagination. But the frog remained, its eyes locked on mine, waiting patiently for a response. Thank you," I stammered, not knowing what else to say. "Who? What are you?" The frog chuckled, a sound like pebbles rolling in a stream. "I am no more than a humble guardian of this place," it replied. "An old friend of your grandmother's, you might say." That was the first disturbance. The crack, however slight, in the veneer of normalcy that had so far defined my visits to Nana's. From that day forward, the frog appeared whenever I went to the pond, always ready with a word or two. Its presence was both comforting and unsettling, a constant reminder that the world was perhaps not as mundane as I had always believed. As weeks turned into months, the frog's appearances became more frequent. It spoke of the garden as if it were alive in ways beyond my comprehension, hinting at secrets hidden in the shadows of leaves and the depths of the pond. Nana seemed unfazed by my accounts of these encounters. She would smile softly, a knowing glint in her eyes, and encourage me to listen, to learn. "The garden has much to teach, if you pay attention," she would say, her words laced with mystery and affection. The frog's tales grew darker over time. It spoke of storms that never came, of creatures that lurked beneath the surface of the pond, unseen and unheard. The garden began to shift subtly, its ambience growing heavier, laced with something unnameable that prickled at the edges of my consciousness. I started to feel watched, as if the very trees had eyes, tracking my movements with silent curiosity. And then the escalation began. It was a moonless night, the kind where the stars seemed to spill across the sky in a torrent of light. I had stayed late at Nana's, engrossed in an old photo album she had dug out from the attic. The garden outside was a silhouette of shadows, every rustle and chirp amplified in the stillness. Unable to sleep, I wandered outside, drawn inexplicably to the pond. The frog was waiting, its emerald skin gleaming under starlight. "Tonight you will see," it said cryptically, its voice carrying an edge that sent a shiver up my spine. Before I could question it further, the surface of the pond began to ripple violently, as if disturbed by an unseen force. My heart pounded in my chest, fear and fascination battling for dominance. Slowly, shapes began to emerge from the water, ethereal and shimmering, like ghostly apparitions rising to the call of some ancient summons. They were frogs, countless in number, their bodies translucent and glowing faintly with a light that seemed to come from within. They gathered around the pond's edge, their eyes reflecting the starlight, and began to croak in unison, a haunting melody that echoed through the garden. I could do nothing but watch, transfixed by the spectacle unfolding before me. The air was thick with magic, with the sense of a world just out of reach, brushing against the fringes of reality. The garden was alive in ways I could never have imagined, and I too felt a part of it, woven into the fabric of its secrets and stories. And then, as quickly as it began, it was over. The ghostly frogs slipped back into the water, their light snuffed out like candles in the wind. Only the emerald frog remained, its eyes reflecting the pale glow of the stars. "This is the truth of the garden," it said softly. "A place where the veil is thin, where you can glimpse the world as it truly is." I spent the rest of the night in a haze, my mind spiraling with questions and possibilities. What had I witnessed? Why had the frog chosen to show me? Was Nana aware of this otherworldly aspect of her beloved garden? The answers eluded me, always just beyond my grasp. The climax came unexpectedly, a jarring intrusion into my now upended reality. I was in the garden again, tending to some particularly stubborn weeds near the pond. The frog, as usual, was nearby, observing with its inscrutable gaze. "You must be careful," it warned suddenly, its tone grave. "The garden is not always so forgiving." Before I could ask what it meant, a low rumble resonated from the pond, the water churning violently. The air around me seemed to pulse with a tangible energy, the garden vibrating with some unseen force. Instinctively, I stepped back, watching in horror as a massive figure began to rise from the depths. It was a frog, but not like any I had seen. Its body was immense, covered in glistening scales, with eyes the size of dinner plates. It towered over me, its croak a deep, resonant boom that reverberated through the garden. The emerald frog moved quickly, positioning itself between me and the giant creature. "You must leave," it urged. "Now." I hesitated, rooted to the spot by fear and fascination. But the urgency in the frog's voice broke through my paralysis, and I turned to flee, my heart pounding with terror. The sight of the giant frog haunted my dreams for nights afterward, its eyes boring into my soul, a reminder of the thin line that separated our world from the other. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of something lurking just beyond the edge of perception, waiting for a chance to break through. Even in the safety of my own home, the lingering fear clung to me like a shadow. I found myself jumping at every creak and groan, convinced that the garden's magic had followed me, infiltrated my life in ways I could not escape. Nana remained my anchor, a gentle presence that kept me tethered to reality. Her garden, she assured me, had always been special, a place where the ordinary and extraordinary coexisted in harmony. But even she could not explain the giant frog's appearance or the role the emerald frog played in it all. I returned to the garden often, drawn by an unnameable compulsion to understand, to uncover the secrets that lay hidden beneath the surface. The emerald frog was there, always watching, always waiting, a silent guardian of a world I was only beginning to comprehend. In time, I came to accept the garden's dual nature, its beauty and its danger, its magic and its mystery. I learned to listen to the whispers in the wind, to sense the presence of unseen eyes, and to respect the delicate balance that kept the garden alive. And though the fear never truly left me, it became a part of me, a reminder of the wonders that lay hidden in the world, waiting for those brave enough to seek them out. Nana's garden remained my sanctuary, a place of solace and discovery, where every visit was an adventure into the unknown. I often wondered about the frog, about its purpose and its past. But deep down, I knew that some questions were best left unanswered, that some mysteries were meant to remain just that, a whisper in the night, a ripple on the pond, a secret shared between a boy and a frog in the heart of a magical garden. Nestled between the relentless waves of the North Atlantic and the windswept cliffs, there lies a small seaside village, clinging stubbornly to the lane as if holding on to the last vestiges of some forgotten time. It is a place where the smell of salt and seaweed permeates the air, and the cries of gulls are a constant companion. The people here are simple, bound to the rhythms of the sea, their lives intertwined with the ebb and flow of the tides. Among them was Kermit, a fisherman whose life was as unremarkable as the weather-beaten streets he walked. Kermit was not a man given to flights of fancy. His days were spent at sea, casting nets and hauling in the fruits of the ocean, while his evenings were reserved for quiet reflection in the small cottage he called home. He had inherited this life from his father, as his father had from his own. The village existed outside of time, a place where change was a distant specter. This suited Kermit just fine. He found solace in the predictability, comfort in the routine. The only hint of magic in his life came from the wild tales spun by the old men in the village pub. They spoke of selkies, mythical creatures that could shed their sealskin to walk on land as humans. Kermit, however, dismissed these stories as fanciful distractions. He was a man of the sea, grounded in the harsh reality of tides and storms, not of mythical creatures. One evening, as Kermit sat on a weathered bench overlooking the churning sea, he noticed something unusual. A figure, wrapped in a dark cloak, stood at the edge of the beach where the waves licked hungrily at the sand. The figure's presence was unsettling, a ripple in the placid surface of Kermit's world. He assumed it was a traveler, passing through as many did, drawn by the rugged beauty of the landscape. Yet there was something about the figure that tugged at the edges of his perception, a whisper of something just out of reach. The following days brought more sightings of the cloaked figure, always at dusk, standing at the water's edge, staring out into the vast expanse of sea. Kermit's curiosity, once dormant, began to stir. He found himself drawn to the beach each evening, seeking answers in the enigmatic presence of the stranger. He kept his distance, hidden in the shadows of the rocks, watching, waiting. The village, with its tightly knit community, noticed his absences, and whispers began to circulate. But Kermit paid them no mind, his thoughts consumed by the stranger. He felt a pull, a connection that defied explanation. It was as if the figure was an integral part of a puzzle he had yet to comprehend. One stormy night, when the wind howled like a beast unleashed and the rain battered the earth with relentless fury, the figure appeared again. This time, the stranger turned, and Kermit caught a glimpse of a face, pale and ethereal, with eyes as deep and inscrutable as the ocean itself. The figure beckoned, a silent invitation that Kermit could not refuse. The air was charged with an otherworldly energy as Kermit approached. He felt a tingling in his skin, a hum in his bones that resonated with the crashing waves. The figure did not speak, but Kermit understood. It was as if he had become part of a story that had been woven long before he was born, and the threads of fate had finally pulled tight. In the days that followed, Kermit's world began to shift. The village, once familiar and comforting, now seemed distant and unreal. He found himself drawn more and more to the sea, where the presence of the stranger lingered like a shadow at the edge of his vision. He began to notice things he had never seen before, the way the moonlight danced on the water, the patterns in the foam, whispers carried on the wind. The villagers noticed the change. Kermit, once a fixture at the pub, now spent his evenings walking the windswept beaches, his mind elsewhere. They spoke of strange happenings, of dreams filled with the sound of the sea, of a feeling of being watched. A tension hung in the air, a sense of something coming, like the gathering clouds before a storm. Kermit, oblivious to the growing unease around him, was consumed by his own transformation. He felt a restlessness, a longing that he could not name. It was as if the sea called to him, a silent song that resonated deep within his soul. He dreamed of water, of diving beneath the surface of a world where he was free, unburdened by the weight of the land. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, Kermit returned to the beach. The figure was there, waiting, as if expecting him. The air was thick with anticipation, and the sea seemed to hold its breath. The figure stepped forward, shedding the cloak, revealing skin that shimmered like moonlit waves. It was a selkie, as the old stories had told, but more beautiful and terrible than Kermit could have imagined. The selkie approached, its eyes meeting his, and in that moment, Kermit understood. The transformation was not just a change of form, but a revelation of his true self. The Selkie reached out, its touch sending a shiver through Kermit's body. He felt the world shift around him, the boundaries between land and sea dissolving. The transformation was not painful, but a release, a shedding of the old to embrace the new. The water embraced him, a lover's caress, and Kermit felt himself changing, the salt water filling his lungs, the waves carrying him away. The village, shrouded in mist and mystery, spoke of Kermit's disappearance in hushed tones. Some said he had been claimed by the sea, others that he had simply left, seeking a new life beyond the horizon. But there were those who whispered of Selkies, of men who walked into the ocean and became something more. The truth, hidden beneath layers of myth and reality, lingered like a shadow on the water. In the days that followed, the villagers noticed a change in the sea. The fish were more plentiful, the storms less fierce. It was as if the ocean, once a capricious and unpredictable force, had been soothed. They spoke of Kermit, of his transformation, as if he had become a part of the sea itself, a guardian watching over them from the depths. For Kermit, the transformation was not an end, but a beginning. He swam through the endless blue, his body sleek and powerful, the water a second skin. He understood now, the pull of the sea, the call of the Selkie. It was a freedom he had never known, a release from the constraints of the land. But even in his new form, a part of Kermit remained tethered to the village, to the life he had left behind. He watched from the depths, a silent guardian, ensuring the safety of his people. The sea, once a domain of mystery and danger, had become his home, a place where he belonged. The villagers, though aware of his presence, never spoke of it openly. It was a secret shared by all, a bond between them and the sea. They felt his protection, sensed his watchful gaze, and in return they honored his memory, remembering the man who had walked into the ocean and become part of its endless mystery. And so, Kermit's story passed into legend, a tale told on stormy nights when the wind howled and the sea roared. The villagers spoke of him with a mixture of awe and reverence, a reminder of the thin veil between their world and the one beyond. The beach where he had vanished became a place of quiet reflection, a reminder of the transformation that had begun with a whisper and ended with the roar of the sea. The village continued, as it always had, nestled between the cliffs and the waves, forever bound to the sea and the mysteries it held. And Kermit, now one with the ocean, watched over it all, a guardian of the deep, a part of the endless cycle of life and transformation.